What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we're going to be going over my hair loss prevention regimen, my current one. So I get asked all the time, Derek, what's your current regimen? And most of you guys probably know that I don't post it very often. And the reason is because it's ever changing. So if I say this is what I'm using, it doesn't mean like literally week to week. It could be different than the week before, depending on if I get a blood test that indicates something, if I think of some other idea that I want to then pursue and then I change my direction. There's a lot of things that influence my protocol at the end of the day. So what I'm doing right now isn't indicative of what I will be doing in a few weeks even, let alone, long-term potentially. But, people obviously have made it very clear they want to know what I'm doing regardless at, each increment. So I just wanted to, I've posted in the comment section before too. A lot of people say, oh, like, why aren't you posting it? It's like, I've responded to the comments so many times now that obviously it's just, I might as well just make a video at this point instead of responding to the comments anymore. So exactly what I'm doing right now. So the last update that I made, honestly, I don't even remember what the last thing I used that I posted about was, but probably the most notable was the injectable SARMs experiment, which set me back. Like, I actually lost ground while I was doing that because it was very androgenic, and I definitely experienced additional progression of my androgenic alopecia during that time frame. And obviously it was a risky experiment, but somebody had to do it, so I did it, and things got worse. But then I started to gain back ground after I stopped it, fortunately. And some of this stuff's really fucking risky when you actually care about your hair, because I'm putting myself in positions where I'm actually could fuck myself over and lose my hair to figure out if this stuff works or not. But fortunately I was able to gain back, the ground I lost from that experiment. And the main sort of the products I've been using, I used after that point, and I'm currently using, I think I did a few mini experiments after that, just off the top of my head. But I think I did like a C60 experiment maybe, and a melatonin one, like a topical melatonin one, and some other stuff. They weren't really super notable though, so that was probably why I didn't post about them. But anyways, as far as like the staples that have been thereafter, and like literally right this second. So the first thing is ketoconazole shampoo. So this is Nizoral. This is 2%. So 2% concentration is over the counter in Canada. In the States, it is not over the counter. So I'm not saying you need to get a prescription for it, because 2%, the difference between 1 and 2% is really not substantial. So like I use still Regimen DR, which is 1% ketoconazole, despite the fact that I have access to 2% Nizoral. What I will do though is typically, because this is way more expensive, is I will use this if I'm going to be going out and I need my hair to look better and not like malnourished essentially, then I'll use this one. But it's way more expensive, so I'm like a bit more sparing with it. Whereas Nizoral, you can just get a bunch of it at Costco super cheap. The reason it's so cheap is because it's just a worse shampoo realistically. There's only one active ingredient in it that's actually helpful. There's only one anti-androgen ingredient in both of them. It's the ketoconazole. But I mean, there's nothing in here to make your hair like look good, to hydrate it, to volumize it, to do, anything that you would use a shampoo for other than the ketoconazole. So it just has ketoconazole. And I'm sure if you've tried Nizoral, you can attest to how much it dries and frizzes your hair out. It just like sucks the life out of it. So I'll use this if I'm going to be at home, but if I'm going out, I'll use Regimen DR. And I will use this at minimum every other day. And I leave it on my scalp for 15 to 20 minutes. And that might be excessive, but I want it to actually get in and do something. So if it's going to do something, I'm going to leave it on for that long in order to actually facilitate that effect. I have experimented with everyday ketoconazole, and if my scalp can tolerate it, it seems to be kind of like hit or miss in terms of sometimes I'll get a bit too dry of a scalp from it if I'm using Nizoral every single day. But something anecdotally I have noticed is some people do actually respond better to using ketoconazole every single day. So especially if you're somebody who can't handle like a topical anti-androgen like RU58841 or CB0301 or whatever, then using ketoconazole shampoo every day might be something you want to consider, because you need not protection every other day, you need protection every day. So anyways, if your hair can handle it, that is, because some people's scalps just aren't going to tolerate that. So anyways, that's something you might want to keep in mind. That is, I thought was worth noting, because some people do get better results using it every day. Next thing is the microneedling. So this is my Derminator 2. You can see it's a pretty, substantially, I don't know, cumbersome device, I guess. I don't know, like compared to an actual derma roller, which is just like a little thing. This is like a giant, it's not giant, it's a mechanical instrument, it's electronic, but it's like essentially a medical grade equipment. Like, if you go in for like a vampire facial and they'd have like high quality, like medical grade equipment to do your microneedling. That's basically what this is, except at home. And instead of paying for one facial where you pay, however much, you pay like a couple $100 to get this thing, and then you have it for the rest of your life and you can use it whenever you want. So I do this once a week at 1.5 millimeters, and I just like wreck my head, to be honest. It's like bloody as fuck after I'm done with it, but it recruits a lot of growth factors that would otherwise potentially be deficient or just absent entirely from your scalp. It's not necessarily offsetting androgenic alopecia, but it can promote or at least encourage healthier new growth, or just healthy growth in general, I suppose. If you've seen my video on the guy who burned his scalp in a coal fire and then just like all of a sudden started growing hair, trauma to the scalp seems to facilitate quite a few things that are really interesting, and microneedling certainly helps. And if you look at the studies, especially if you're a minoxidil user, it's like a no-brainer to see if you can tolerate incorporating them together, because it's like 1 + 1 = 3 when you use them in conjunction with one another. And it's honestly not that annoying, because when you use this thing, a lot of people, they don't want to spend the extra money for it. And I used to buy like $20 derma rollers too. First of all, the derma rollers, they roll and they go in at an angle and come out at an angle. So it can cause tearing of your scalp, which may potentially damage your hair. And on top of that, like this goes in and out, straight in and out, and creates channels, as opposed to rollers. They go in at an angle, come out at an angle, and cause tearing of the scalp. This one just goes in and out. But it saves so much time, it's not even funny. If I've used a manual derma pen before and just go like, bah, 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 and done it like all over my scalp. It takes so long. You don't get enough stabs in to actually make it a efficient process. With this thing, you can literally punch thousands of holes in your head in like a matter of minutes. You can do an hour-long session of like poking yourself and stabbing yourself within a few minutes. So for me, the time saved and the precision too, the thing is set to have like an exact depth, and you can even set the time limits and stuff. It's like a no-brainer investment in my opinion, especially if you're somebody who uses minoxidil. And I don't even use minoxidil, but that's even without me using minoxidil, I still think it's worth it. So anyways, I'll put the link to this in the description below if you end up wanting to get that. I highly recommend it. What else? I have castor oil. So you might have seen my video on oral castor oil. I still do drink this once in a while. Yes, drink. I don't recommend doing it. It's supposed to be, realistically, it's not even supposed to be used as a laxative necessarily. They can't really advise that on the label. But I have a few milliliters of this a day, and I cycle it just because the potential, chronically raising PGE2, what kind of deleterious impact that may have long term, I don't want to find out. So I'm at least going to cycle it. And it's a growth agonist. It's not something that's going to prevent loss, so it's not necessarily like a mandatory thing, but I think it does make a noticeable difference, and it's not going to cause a brutal shed like minoxidil or back you into a corner like minoxidil, where you're then forced to take it every single day for the rest of your life, or else you're going to experience, a giant shedding phase of whatever you've been artificially holding on to, essentially. So to me, it's kind of like a cheap, low risk growth agonist, at least, objectively from what I've seen so far. And to me, it's been worth experimenting with. So I've been doing that recently. I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying that's what I've been doing. So take from that what you will. Next thing is RU58841. So this is, you're going to focus. There you go. Okay, so I've been using that. Probably heard me talk about it many times before. It is probably the most tried and true topical anti-androgen in our community at the moment. I don't think it's the best option for every single person. I think it is a bit of a hit or miss treatment, but with that being said, I respond very well to it, and it has a lot of things going for it, despite the fact that it isn't in an FDA pipeline like CB is. The binding affinity is actually comparable to that of testosterone, so that puts it in a unique position whereby even if you have fairly aggressive loss and you don't respond that well to RU monotherapy, if you incorporated a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, you can crush a significant amount of DHT, which this otherwise has a pretty difficult time dealing with because of the increased binding affinity of DHT relative to T. So as you already know, probably if you understand pharmacology of all this stuff to begin with, is DHT binds with a much higher affinity for AR than testosterone, and it's partially why it causes hair loss, and it's like the root of the issue, despite, or you know, many will tell you it's the root of the issue despite the fact that it is only produced at like 10% the rate of testosterone, or I should say converted. 10% of testosterone is 5-alpha reduced into DHT, so there's obviously way less DHT than test, but it's still, you know, the thing that causes hair loss, you know, what most people will tell you. And it is largely responsible for the majority of it, but it's not the full story. But still, anyways, you don't need much DHT to cause hair loss. So DHT is very hard to compete with at AR for competitive inhibition. So something like RU, which is only comparable on paper to something like testosterone, it has a difficult time competing for AR. And frankly, all anti-androgens have a very difficult time competing for AR. So the reason why RU is so good, in my opinion, is because it's way better at binding than most other things that we have available to us. And it puts you in a unique position where you can sort of, you know, chop out as much DHT as you want systemically via 5-alpha reductase inhibition. And then you have the opportunity to then the subsequent rise in scalp testosterone you can then compete with much greater ease with something like this than you would otherwise if you were forced to try and compete with DHT and testosterone locally with just AR inhibitor. So that's sort of the idea behind using it, in my opinion, as far as like effective implementation. The next thing is oral finasteride. So a lot of people will probably be asking me why I would use oral finasteride when I respond well to RU. The reason being, so this is, when I first started, you know, researching RU, it was a very, frankly, it's still very not thoroughly researched or like used by a lot of people. It's sort of like picked up steam in the community, I think, over the past few years though, and more people have experimented with it and whatnot. But when I first started using it, no one was really using it, to be honest. Maybe like an obscure, like certain individuals, but no one really had, you know, experimented with it to the extent that I have. And a lot of this stuff I've learned as I've gone. And like when I first found RU, a lot of the stuff that I like saw on paper didn't exactly, like I didn't know anything about like binding affinity. I didn't know anything about, I'm not even gonna delve into all the stuff I didn't know about, because I was like, my intelligence level 4 years ago was like a fucking 10th of what I know now. So my stance on it back when I first found out about it is a lot different than what it is now that I've researched thousands of hours more about pharmacology, hair loss, bodybuilding, anything related to health and longevity and optimization and whatnot. So my stance is, you know, changed on finasteride a bit. Back in the day, I thought, oh, this is just the worst fucking thing ever. And frankly, I don't think it's good to inhibit DHT. Like, I don't think it's a healthy thing to do. For hair, it's good. But for all other health processes in the body, it is not ideal whatsoever. But it definitely helps prevent hair loss, for sure. So if you aren't, my sort of justification for why I would use it as opposed to just using RU is if I don't use finasteride, even though I respond well to RU, if I don't use finasteride or inhibit 5-alpha reductase at all, just like I outlined earlier about how RU has a difficult time competing with DHT and all topical anti-androgens have a very difficult time competing with DHT, I would have to use a way higher dose of RU to effectively compete for AR if I was only using RU as opposed to RU plus fin. So for me, the logic in it is not necessarily that I absolutely need this or that somebody absolutely needs this. It's more so that the exorbitant dose of this you would need to use to effectively antagonize AR and compete with testosterone and DHT in the scalp could be so high that it would have deleterious side effects for you. Like, this isn't side effect free either, especially if it gets systemic, which, you know, it's partially going to, and then there's metabolites that can have anti-androgenic activity and whatnot. So, like, ideally I want to achieve hair loss prevention with the lowest effective dose of everything I'm using. So for me, I would rather deploy something that has, you know, takes care of a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and gives a compounding level of protection with a relative lack of side effects, rather than if I don't inhibit DHT at all, I'm basically putting myself in a position where I have to use a fucking mega dose of an experimental research chemical, which I would rather not do. I want to use something that's, you know, a reasonable dose. It's not like there's an established therapeutic amount for it, obviously, but I mean, you know, just in relative terms, I don't want to be taking triple digit numbers to achieve what I could with, you know, lower double digit numbers of milligrams per day if I just inhibited some of the DHT orally, you know what I mean, with 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. So for me, in the grand scheme of things, health-wise, that seems like the better move and is a lot more predictable long-term in terms of sustainability. So that is sort of like what I've been doing up to now, or at least for the past, you know, couple months, I should say. But some of the things that I am going to be getting into soon, the experiments will be, you know, starting up again, and things are going to change. So this protocol is not set in stone. It's not, probably not even what I'm going to be doing long-term, realistically. Things are changing constantly in my regimen, and it's largely because I basically want to get to a point where I have tried everything, and then I could put out some sort of comprehensive guide where I elaborate on everything I've taken, which is going to include like every fucking drug that could possibly have merit, to be honest. And that's sort of my goal, is to have like a dedicated breakdown of every single thing and how much therapeutic promise I think they each have, side effect profile, things to look out for, you know, how it affected me, personal blood work, anecdotal reports, other things that, you know, the clinical promise in an actual, you know, like setting and clinical studies and whatnot. Pretty much everything that I would have wanted to know before I spent thousands of hours of research and injecting fucking experimental chemicals into my body. So that's sort of where I'm trying to get with all this to begin with, is as well as figure out what the most, you know, health tolerant, you know, lowest risk method of maintaining my hair is long term. And finding that out is essentially going to involve experimenting with everything, including, you know, cutting edge treatments that are potentially viable and novel drug candidates that are in the pipeline. So some of the things that I have, I might as well break down to you what some of my upcoming experiments are too, just to keep you in the loop on that, because I'm sure you guys will want to know if you wanted to know about this protocol to begin with. Oh, and as far as where to get like Regimen, if you want to support the channel, I have a Regimen link in the video description below as well. Anything else I'm associated with that I've mentioned, if I have like a affiliate thing or some sort of like partnership, I'll put it in the video description below if you guys want to support the channel. As far as the experiments I'm going to be doing moving forward, so PGD2, prostaglandin D2 inhibition, that's something I detailed recently about my stance on cetipiprant, fevipiprant, and OC000459. So I've tried Seti orally and topically, didn't do anything for me. I've tried OC topically, didn't do anything for me. Fevi I didn't try, but I'm going to. And I have OC, I actually did a bit more digging. It's actually a lot more promising than I initially thought, but I haven't tried it orally. So that's something I wanted to delve into a bit deeper. Also Pulmogen, something that I neglected to, or I guess I just didn't even think about it at the time, to mention in my PGD2 inhibitor or antagonist video. Another candidate with a lot of therapeutic promise. Pulmogen and OC in particular are the two most potentially viable candidates in this class of drug that I've seen, with fevipiprant potentially being in third it just does not have as much clinical data backing its efficacy, despite on paper it being very potent. So those are the three things I sort of want to delve into in that category a bit deeper before I sort of like check that off the bucket list sort of thing. Next thing, prostaglandin F2 alpha analogs. So this includes latanoprost and bimatoprost. So these are the glaucoma medications that are used for almost like minoxidil for your eyes. It's like these drugs that treat high pressure inside the eye, and they found as a side effect that they grow eyelashes significantly. And it's then been theorized that it could then do the same sort of thing locally on the scalp. And in practical application at a high enough dose, it seems to be the case. But the mechanism is a bit different than how minoxidil facilitates this, and it doesn't, supposedly it's not associated with this giant shedding phase or this dependence on it to maintain, like if you come off of it, you're not going to like induce some crazy ridiculous shed, at least supposedly. So personally, I'm going to be trying both of those and then figuring out if they have therapeutic promise. Then I'm also going to be looking into something called WNT signaling with something called SM04554. I'm going to be trying that as well. I'm also going to be digging a bit into topical 5-alpha reductase inhibition. So topical finasteride and dutasteride, as well as dutasteride mesotherapy. These are things I already sort of have conclusions on as far as I've really dug through the data, and I have like conclusive opinions on if they go systemically. It's pretty obvious they do. And the thing is though, is with topical, you have a lot more leeway in how you can manipulate your dosing, because you can literally dispense a certain amount or dilute it further. Whereas with oral, you can only crush a tablet into so many pieces before it's just dust. So if you want to microdose fin or dutasteride, topical might almost be the better alternative, because you can actually get these micro doses without ending up with a impossible to measure amount of drug. So like when you have dutasteride, for example, it's like in a gel cap. You can't split that up into smaller doses. With finasteride, it comes in either a 1 milligram tablet or a 5 milligram Proscar tablet, which is what I have, and they're split into quarters. You can't split that up further into like smaller dosages. So for me, like I don't personally get side effects from oral finasteride, fortunately, or dutasteride, but it doesn't mean I don't want to explore the therapeutic promise of the topical 5-alpha reductase inhibitors for, you know, actually relaying to you guys, because some of you guys aren't going to be able to take this stuff orally. You're going to have debilitating side effects because of the lack of, you know, customization available to us in terms of, you know, in the pharmaceutical realm when it comes to these drugs. It's not like you can just get your doctor to prescribe you 0.1 milligram of something. They're going to give you like the clinical dosage that they're told to prescribe you, which is going to be potentially way more than you need or way more than what would give you side effects or whatever. So I don't necessarily think that topical 5-AR inhibitors are going to be, I'll save that for the other video. I was basically going to comment on their effect on scalp versus serum DHT relative to oral, you know, the oral route of administration, if there's a difference or not. I feel like that is something I could end up talking another 15 minutes about though, so I'll save that for another video. But I do have a stance on that, and I think it is worth talking about. So also peptides, these are some things I just want to check off the bucket list. These aren't things I find super promising, but there's things that you can get over the counter that are found in serums, like growth serums and whatnot. They're more so like random stuff marketed by cosmetic companies that anecdotally seem to have some positive feedback. So they're definitely worth exploring. I've already purchased them and I'm going to be trying them. So those are things I kind of just want to like, frankly, I kind of just want to check them off my bucket list in terms of writing off that they suck. But if they end up not sucking, then it's something I obviously want to, you know, talk about, because it's a side effect free thing that I could potentially private label myself, or just, you know, relay to you guys and let you know that there's actually something worth getting that isn't a drug necessarily, or something that isn't a prescription drug that is going to inhibit your androgens, I guess would be a better description. Also, and then the final thing is some candidates for AR antagonists and selective agonists of AR. So these are some things that I want to delve into as well. And I feel like this video is getting really, really fucking long. It's closing on 30 minutes, so I'm not gonna detail exactly what those all are. I'll save them for the videos. But that is where I'm at with my current protocol, as well as the stuff I want to experiment with in the near future. And I will have some conclusions on before the end of the year, hopefully, and then have some sort of like culminating presentation that I can post on my site, or I don't know, make like a landing page for it and have some sort of like education course surrounding it or something. I don't know. I haven't really figured out exactly what I'm going to do with it, but it's going to be some sort of like breakdown of everything. And yeah, hopefully it's I have to test some more shit out before I have that launched, but it's in the pipeline. So okay, so everything I've been experimenting with myself, I already showed in the video, but as far as some of the stuff I mentioned I was gonna be delving into, like the latanoprost, I just wanted to show you guys, as well as the topical finasteride. I wanted to show you guys where I am getting it through my HRT clinic. So this is all pharma grade stuff compounded at a pharmacy. What I am currently doing is the latanoprost compounded with finasteride, but I will be introducing this high potency latanoprost 0.06 soon to get closer to the clinical dosage found in the androgenic alopecia studies, where they cranked it up to 0.1%. So I'm going to apply a few milliliters of this per day at least, in conjunction with the topical latanoprost and finasteride. And obviously I've been using the finasteride tablets as well, which I showed in the video. And then everything else I mentioned that isn't in here in the pharmacy grade section is stuff you can either get on Amazon or through whatever other websites correspond to the product I mentioned, because some of the stuff is not stuff sold through a pharmacy. It's either over the counter or somewhere else on the internet. So if you want to get anything prescribed to you from our HRT clinic, you can check this out as well. The link is going to be in the description below with everything else, as well as the pinned comment. We have pretty much everything you could need pharmaceutical wise, finasteride. We have topical finasteride, trichofoam, 60-gram bottles. We have minoxidil compounded with topical finasteride. We have minoxidil compounded with tretinoin to enhance enzymatic conversion with finasteride, without finasteride. We have, honestly, I think if you are somebody who wants the most effective growth agonist, obviously minoxidil is one of the go-tos, but keep in mind, not everyone wants to use minoxidil. So the next best alternative, I find, I'm finding latanoprost is actually very promising. But if you are somebody who wants the most bang for your buck, then I think you would actually find the most benefit from combining the two of them, because they're actually very effective on their own. Minoxidil a bit more so than latanoprost, of course, but in conjunction with one another, it's like 1 + 1 = like 4 or 5. And especially when you're combining microneedling with compounding with tretinoin as well, to increase enzymatic conversion to minoxidil sulfate, which is something I'm going to delve into in either tomorrow's video or the day after, as far as the efficacy of combining minoxidil, tretinoin, and outlining some of the major discoveries found in regards to the, I guess, pharmacodynamics of minoxidil and how it really works in the body in terms of its conversion to the form that actually does something in the scalp, and non-responders, and how to convert a minoxidil non-responder into a responder and significantly enhance your results. So some people, they use minoxidil, get zero results. And there's actually a way to prevent that and actually have everyone, or the majority of people, become responders and respond extremely well to it, at least from what I've seen. So that is going to be what I'm going to be delving into. If anything interests you on this site that you want to get prescribed, just create and register an account, add it to your wish list. Anything you add to your wish list, a patient care coordinator from our clinic will contact you to discuss your medications you want to order, and then from there you can get coordinated with our doctor to get prescriptions filled over telemedicine, Skype, FaceTime, Zoom. It's all super convenient from the comfort of your own home. So honestly, the way of the future, in my opinion, rather than trying to go to a doctor and trying to explain why you could possibly need this stuff, because they're just not going to understand. And I'm sick of dealing with, general physicians who don't know fucking shit about blood work or hair loss or anything to do with hormone optimization, HRT, TRT, any of that stuff. So if any of this stuff interests you, check it out, and stay tuned for more videos on this stuff. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe if you want to stay notified when I post updates on this stuff. If you want to get sent the articles, which are more concise than these videos and have, table of content, broken down subsections, hyperlinks to all the clinical studies I referenced, you can sign up for the mailing list. First link in the description below. Highly recommend you do that. Otherwise, you will not get sent those articles. Like I said, if any of the stuff I've mentioned I'm like associated with at the time of publishing this video, or I have some sort of like way to support the channel via them, I'll put the links in the description below. Follow me on Instagram at @moreplates_more_dates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, wherever I am. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.